hit the record. Okay, so I begin by saying the limud tonight should be Leili Nishmat Avi Mori, Dov Ber Meir, Ben Ruben Halevi, Imi Marati, Rachel Bat Harav Michael. And today we're talking about parshat Eikev, and specifically tonight we are actually going to talk about one chapter in Eikev which we should be very familiar with. That is, of course, the second parsha of Shema. But more so, I wanted to talk about that in the context of the four Parshiot that we happen to put in our Tefillin. And so that's really the focus tonight, is really the Tefillin, comparing and contrasting the different psukim and the different themes of these four Parshiot. Because while we are well aware that there are four Parshiot in the Tefillin, we often don't look at them as a unit to try to understand why were these four Parshiot chosen, why specifically these themes are so essential, and I'm hoping we'll get a chance to discuss a little bit of that tonight. So we begin with, again, you'll notice I have the four Parshiot across the top, Shema starting on one side, Eikev on the other. And unfortunately, I ran out of readable colors, so the green on the two left columns is not the same as the green on the right two right columns. So I had to reuse green so that we'd be able to see everything, the color scheme. So I wanted to first focus on, again, the parsha of the four Parshiot film I think we're most familiar with, of course, is Shema Yisrael. I want to go through each of the four chapters individually, and then we're going to go through all four collectively. Again, very briefly, we're very familiar with Shema. One of the key mitzvot is of Yahavta et Hashem Elokecha, of loving Hashem b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha b'chol me'odecha. Clearly, one of the most well-known mitzvot. If we continue the Shema, we have it's the briefest of the four Parshiot. Ve'yu advarim el asher anochi mitzav chayom al levavecha. And then we have two psukim, one of Shinantum Levanecha. You have to pass this on to the next generation. This is a very important theme of the Shema, is passing things on to the next generation. But also this concept, Ukshartam liot al yodecha v'yutotafot beinei necha, which obviously is the mitzvah of Tefillin. And finally, when it comes to Shema, we have an additional mitzvah of also the mezuzah. So that's the very brief, quick outline of Shema. We get to the second chapter, which, of course, as I said in this week's parsha, the chapter of Vayayim Shemoah. And again, we have a very interesting concept, same thing. Lahavad Hashem Elokecha uli avdo. So we have this extra word here, uli avdo. And notice the b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha has now become levavchem and nafshechem. So we've now switched from the Shema being in the singular, Vayayim Shemoah being in the plural, addressed to everybody collectively, as opposed to Shema, which is addressed to everybody singularly. Interestingly enough, we have this entire digression here in Vayayim Shemoah, which seems to touch on the concept of collective reward, collective punishment. Two psukim in Atati mitarar tzvem bitorio malkosh yosafta genechos yorosh chitzarecho Atati ez psat livim techa v'chalto v'savata speak to what will happen if we do observe. Hashem will give us the rains in the proper seasons. You'll be able to gather in the crops. You'll have grass in the field for your animals to graze, and you will eat and be satisfied. And then we have these two psukim of exactly the opposite. What will happen if not? Be very wary that you don't turn away from Hashem. You'll turn away and you'll serve other gods and bow to them. Hashem will be angry. The otzar et hashemayim lo yeh matar. Two things will happen. First, Hashem will cause there to be no rain and therefore no crops. And then ultimately, if you go further and still don't get the message, you will be removed from the land that Hashem is giving you. So we have a clear connection in Vayayim Shemoah. Not only do we have this concept, as we said before, of connection to God, but we have the consequences of performance, the consequences of failure to performance, and then again, a very similar almost exactly the same conclusion as the parsha of the Shema. Again, as I note, levavchem nafshchem instead of al levavacha. And then, interestingly enough, these two phrases, the teaching to your children and then tefillin, get swapped. This tefillin comes first, is followed by again, these two passages that we have in the Shema of teaching our children, whether we are in the house, etc., etc., all is before tefillin. Here in this parsha, it's after the command for the tefillin. Both then follow with the mitzvah mezuzot, and then at the end of Ayah Shema, we have an addendum. The addendum says very simply, very, very similar phraseology to what we had before in terms of what will happen if we don't listen. Here is in order. We are told that the whole reason that you have to listen to this and do all these things that you're told in this parsha is in order that you will yirbu yimechem. You will have length of days and your children in Eretz Yisrael. In other words, in order for the Jewish nation to survive in Eretz Yisrael, this is the fundamental principles of Ayayim Shemoah. Okay, let's again briefly go to the other two. Now, the other two, both of these two, as I said, are in Dvarim. They're toward the end of Moshe's life. We see these two parshiot included. The first two are included in Parshat Bo. Bnei Israel have just left Egypt. They have not yet received the Torah, and they have not even crossed the Yam Suf yet. These two parshiot are written and recorded in the Torah between the leaving of Egypt and the crossing of the sea. And here are the two parshiot, which are both in the same chapter in Shemot, one after the other. Again, first thing, Hashem commands Moshe that there is this mitzvah of sanctifying the firstborn. We have to always remember the day we left Egypt, because with a strong arm, Hashem took you out of Mitzrayim. This concept in red, this chozek yad, we will note is repeated again in the second chapter, both at the end of the third and fourth chapters. Does not appear in Shema. No connection whatsoever to the exodus from Egypt in Shema and V'hayayim Shemoah. A very strong connection to the exodus from Egypt in the other two parshiot that we are reading, that we are including in the Tefillin. Okay. Then we have this concept in both of these, again, remembering that the third and fourth, which happened 40 years earlier as they're just leaving Egypt, both have the phrase, when Hashem will bring you, then you have all of these different commandments. Now, it's interesting because if we look at Parsha 3, Kadesh, and Parsha 4, we have two different sets of emphases. The emphasis in Parak 3 of Kadesh Li Kol Bechor, even though it mentions the whole concept of the firstborn, it's only mentioned this focus here on entire, again, digression about the laws of Pesach. In brief, Shivat Yamim Tochal Matzot Yom HaShichag L'Hashem, Matzot Yachelet Shivat Yamim Lo Yochas Chametz Lo Yochas Or B'Chol Gvulecha V'Gat Levincha Yom Aleimor V'Zeh Asa Hashem L'Mitzvei Tzrayim. A very brief, capsulated summary of the laws of Pesach. We have 7 days of eating matzah. We have a chag at the seventh day. We have to bring the korban pesach at the beginning of the chag. We don't have chametz for 7 days. And this concept of relating the story about the exodus from Egypt. All four of those concepts are in this short parak, this short 3-4 psukim segment that forms the body of this chapter in the Tefillin. And then we get to the conclusion. In order, now here this is the only one where we're given this Leman Tiyeh Torah Hashem Beficha. The very word focus of the purpose of the Tefillin is that the Torah, the words of Hashem, the teachings of Hashem should be with us on a regular basis. Beficha, in our mouths, it's something we should be accustomed to on a regular basis, speaking the words of Torah. And then again, the reason given here is okay. Now, interestingly enough, this third parak also has a simple addendum. This seems, again, it reminds us that we have to keep the mitzvah of the Karban Pesach and the laws of Pesach every year. And that's the addendum there. And then we go to chapter 4, which you'll notice I listed Pasukim Yud Aleph, Yud Gimel, Yud Gimel twice, because I wanted you to see the blue and the blue here, and then the green and the green here. Similar phraseology. Here we have this concept in the 4th chapter, which is Vayakiv Yacha, which we already had. This concept of when Hashem will bring you into Eretz Yisrael appears both in the 3rd and 4th chapters of the Tefillin. But the primary focus here is, again, Kol Peta Rechem Lashem Kol Peta Sheker Be'ema. The whole mitzvah of the firstborn and redeeming the firstborn males and redeeming your firstborn donkey. All of that is included here as the primary focus here. And then we have, again, a digression. When your son will ask you, why are we doing all this with the firstborn? You'll tell him that the key thing that the Bechor is to remind us, all mitzvot relating to Bechor are to remind us about the Exodus from Egypt. And when Paro didn't want to send us out, Hashem had to kill all the Bechor Eretz Yitzrayim, the Bechor Adam, Bechor Be'ma, Kenon Zevach Hashem Kol Peta Rechem Azodim, Kol Bechor B'nai. Again, repeating, this is why we perform the mitzvah, all the mitzvah relating to Bechor, because Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Again, has to be Tefillin and Kibbutz Yodot Tzyon Hashem Mitzrayim. Okay. So that's a very, very brief, quick outline of the 4 Parshiot. And if we look through the 4 Parshiot, as I said, they seem to be in 2 pairs, Shema and Vayom Shamoah, which clearly are a pair from a variety of reasons. Firstly, they are the 2 Parshiot that appear not only in Tefillin, but also in Mezuzah, whereas the other 2 do not appear in Mezuzah. And also, they are the 2 which form the basis of the Kriyat Shema that we recite every day. So those 2 are clearly one unit, and it seems that the other 2 are clearly a separate unit, a different unit, both together joined to form the Tefillin. If we look at the themes that are brought about, that are the focus of the Tefillin, we find first and foremost in Parshat Shema, the concept of our relationship with Hashem. Very important that we have not just a going through the motions relation with Hashem, but an emotional relationship with Hashem. This concept of v'yahavto et Hashem Elokecha, as we're told here, im shamoah tishmol mitzvotai la'ahava et Hashem Elokecha uli avdo. It's not enough to just serve Hashem. We have to first have this emotional attachment, connection to Hashem, and then uli avdo. And by the way, the emotional attachment's not enough without uli avdo. Interestingly enough, Chazal referred to these 2 chapters, chapter of Shema, as Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shamayim, the acceptance of Hashem as our king, our ruler, the one who has the ability to command us. And chapter of Hayayim Shamoah is referred to in the Gemara as Kabbalat Ol Mitzvot, the acceptance of the yoke of mitzvot. So these 2 parashot together, joined together, to form the basis of our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of recognition of Hashem as the commander, as the one who, as the creator who gives us, who commands, and the acceptance of living our lives according to those commands. Those are the 2 concepts that form the foundation of these 2 chapters. And then, as I said, concept almost parenthetical of communal reward and punishment. And in reality, when we talk about communal reward and punishment, what the pasuk is really saying is the following. If we look at these psukim, Yud Daled, Tet Vav, Tet Zayin, and Yud Zayin, what they're really saying is the following. If we are committed to living a Torah life, Hashem will provide the conditions for us to be free to provide, to live that life. There will be rain in abundance. There will be crops in abundance. Your needs will be attended to by Hashem as long as you follow the mitzvot of Hashem. If we don't, Hashem will remove that. We will remove the rain. Therefore, there'll be no crops, no food. And And the ultimate result is, since you won't be able, since you chose not to observe the mitzvot in Israel, again, collectively, you will collectively be banished from Eretz Yisrael. So the only way the Jewish people can survive in Eretz Yisrael, and that's what we close this second chapter with, L'man yirbu yemechem mimei menechem, if we want to, as a nation, survive and thrive in Eretz Yisrael, we have to remain connected to Hashem and observe the mitzvot. And not just, as I said, not just go through the motions. We have to have an emotional connection. Li avad Hashem uli avdo. Two of them go together. And if we understand the difference between these two rationales, I think that helps explain why we have these two phrases about V'shinanton v'necha and ukshartem are reversed between Shema and V'haya im Shamoa. Because in Shema, we are focusing on our emotional attachment to Hashem, on acknowledgement of Hashem, so that we can have this emotional attachment. And there, before we worry about taking care of ourselves by tying it on our tefillin and doing it on every day, we have to make sure that we inculcate our children with these beliefs, with these values, with this acknowledgement of Hashem. And that's why Vishnantam, in my opinion, I believe is before Ukshartam Liot. Whereas when it comes to acceptance of mitzvot, Ukshartam Liot al yedchem yutot beineinechem is part and parcel of the mitzvot. And therefore it comes before, because just like we have to teach our children about all of the mitzvot, we also have to teach them about the importance of the mitzvah of tefillin. It's not enough to just teach your children, okay, put tefillin on every day. That's very important. You have to go through the motions, but to teach them the meaning of the tefillin, the values that are contained therein. And again, basic, as I said, the basis of Shema Vayim Shemoah Kadesh and Vayocha. Why are these four parshiot chosen, which I hope we'll get to in a minute? But let's quickly go through the themes, as I said, of the third and fourth. The second pair are very much connected to Yetziat Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt. And there are two ways that we primarily focus ourselves in the presence of our children again on these concepts of Yetziat Mitzrayim, one being the observance of Pesach, the Vigadat Levincha, the eating matzah, the not eating chametz, all of the preparation for Pesach, of cleaning the house, of baking the matzah, of making sure we have special food, all of that is so that our children will ask or will understand that something special is going on. There's a special observance that goes on because we have to stay connected to our past. We do not forget our past, because without our past, we have no future. And I think that message is clearly a critical and contingent part of our Pesach Seder, of our Pesach observance on a yearly basis. That is the focus of chapter 3 of the Tefillin, but the focus of chapter 4 of Tefillin is the other aspect of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Not just that we got out and we keep it through and we remember it and we go through it, but we have this observance of dedicating our first of everything to Hashem because of Hashem taking us out of Egypt. That connection of Bechor, which again is something that happens maybe not as frequently in some places as others, but this concept of connecting ourselves through our Bechorim, through our, again, the same thing applies to the fact that we take Challah, it's called Reshit. It's the same concept. Bikurim that we take every year is the same concept of taking the first fruits of our labor and realizing that the only reason our labor was successful is because of Hashem. And that connects us back not just to Hashem as the creator and the grantor of Eretz Yisrael, but also to Hashem as the grantor of all of our bounty and the one who took us out of Mitzrayim. So all of those things connect back to fundamentals: belief in Hashem as the creator and that we have to have a personal relationship, belief in Hashem as the architect of history who took us out of Mitzrayim, and as I said, from Vayim Shemoah, the concept of acceptance of Hashem's mitzvot, and concept of reward, punishment is also in this whole chapter. The final, as I said, so if we take all of that and wrap it up and understand that we are putting this on, when we put the tefillin on every day, we are testifying to all of these truths: existence of God, our connection to God, our connection to reward and punishment, and our connection to the exodus from Egypt. All of those things are tied up in these parshiot. And I think if we go back and try to say, why were these four parshiot selected? Why these four parshiot do we have this mitzvah to wear them? As I said, I think because together they form the foundation, the basis of everything that we do. Our history, our connection to God, our concept of without a past, we have no future, but the future is critical. That's why there's this whole concept of teaching our children. We got to Levincha, the whole part of the story of Pesach, that we have to relate the story to our children. It's not enough to just do everything. We have to talk about it. All of those things, education-wise, are assuring the future because we remember the past and we remember our connection to Hashem. So I think that if we look at these four in total and we look at this whole idea of the Tefillin, we get the foundations of Judaism, the fundamentals of Judaism, and the fundamentals of our individual and collective relationship with Hashem. And when we were able to strengthen and build that relation on a daily basis, because relationships aren't built by one time, once in a while you get together for a family simcha. They're built on the day-to-day interactions, the day-to-day, the week-to-week, the ongoing relationship. As we know, when there's a vast difference between being close to our children and grandchildren when they're living close to us versus when they're not. It's the same thing with Hashem. When Hashem is close to us and we feel close to him, we have a very different relationship than when we feel alienated from Hashem. And we hope and pray that we should all understand these concepts, learn from them, and strengthen our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu as we prepare. Of course, once we pass Tisha B'Av, we're already looking forward to the Chagim, the upcoming Yomim Noraim, Chodesh of Elul, where we again are going to try to renew our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We hope and pray that Hashem should hear all of our tefillot and bless us all with health, with a good year, and we should be zocheh to Gulu Shleim Meher Yameinu. Amen.
Aaron, can you just elaborate on the Totafot Beinei Necha?
The Totafot Beinei Necha.
The sign between your eyes.
Yes, sign between your eyes. Okay. Now you'll notice, firstly, and as I alluded to a little bit before. One second, I just want to hold on.
Put here in yellow.
1 second. Give me 1 second here. Here.
And then again, you've got a zikaron beinei necha to remember between your eyes.
Right. Hold on 1 second. I lost something here. I want to just hold on a second because I.